Assalamualaikum. A very good morning to everyone, and afternoon if you're already ahead of Malaysia time. All right. Inshallah, today I'm going to be discussing the topic on conflict management, right? Another topic on organizational behavior. So these are some of the topics that I'll be looking at today. All right. So the definition, consequences, the different types of conflict, right? The conflict process model and conflict handling styles, as well as conflict management and third party dispute resolution. Okay, inshallah. So, overall, Islam does acknowledge that conflict does happen, right? Because when you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with human behaviors, right? Not everybody gets along all of the time. And considering that, alhamdulillah, we come from different races, age, gender, backgrounds, experiences, life experiences, or even educational experiences, right? All those differences would have or could potentially lead to conflict, right? Because we have different values, different interests, okay? And then also the language that we use could lead to misunderstandings or miscommunication, okay? When just the terminology that we use could lead to somebody not understanding our meaning, okay? And then again, like I said, when you're dealing with humans, you're also dealing with their ego, right? And people also have their own personal agendas, objectives, so all of that, right? So conflict can occur if two or more people feel that there are unacceptable differences, right? Or the fact that somebody may be taking advantage of them, right? Whether or not that other person is or isn't, but the person believes that they are, that could potentially lead to conflict, yeah? Now, there is always a debate that says, is conflict good or bad? Now, the traditional view was that all conflict is bad, and companies would try to find a way to avoid any kind of conflict, right? That's actually not very good, because you are not acknowledging it and then trying to hide that conflict that is happening is just going to lead to bigger problems later on, right? Obviously, the impact of negative or the negative impact of conflict, right? People are getting stressed, people are not performing, right? There could be higher absenteeism, higher turnovers, right? There's low morale, people don't want to work with each other and such, okay? However, the contemporary view is that maybe a little bit of conflict, but the right kind of conflict, which inshallah we'll discuss that in a little while, can actually lead to better performance, better decision making, right? Better output, okay, more responsive to the environment that is constantly changing, and hopefully we can also become more cohesive as a team, right, if we feel that we as a team are in competition or conflict with some other team or some other force outside of our group, okay? So certain types of conflict may be considered good, right, compared to other types of conflict, which we're going to look at, inshallah, right? So the issue is that conflict is not necessarily a negative issue. It is more on how that conflict is being handled. Because if the conflict is more towards the work, right, rather than more towards people, right, which we'll look at in a while, then this is something that we can work with. Okay, so the Quran says in Surah Al-Hujurat, right, verse 9, and if two groups among the believers fight, then make peace between them, right? So we have to try and look at conflict management later on, and which is provided by Islam, right? Provides a comprehensive framework for trying to understand conflict and also guiding us on how to manage and resolve conflict. These are, of course, based on the Quran, the Hadith, right, the Islamic jurisprudence, as well as Islamic ethics. The emphasis, that Islam takes in terms of the approach to conflict management is more on instilling a sense of justice, right? Reconciliation, meaning to reconcile between the members to basically resolve the issue, right? And to also preserve the social harmony, the ukhwa, right, between the people. Okay, while recognizing that because we are dealing with humans, we are dealing with human behaviors, conflict is a natural part of the human interaction, right? Even among siblings, among spouses, among colleagues, among, parent and child, right? There could be different types of conflict. And we will try to discuss this issue in terms of what conflict may be, as well as how to resolve it, inshallah, at least manage it. Yeah. Now, in companies, there are generally two types of conflict, right? Task conflict versus relationship conflict. Now, task conflict is focusing on the work itself, right? The arguments, the discussion is about what the work should be, what the focus should be, who should do what, when it should be done, right? What kind of facilities should be utilized. People may still be friends. They are still very supportive of each other, but they may not have an agreement about what the task should be or how it should be carried out. Right? The task conflict, since it focuses on the work itself, they still show respect for each other. They do not critique the other person's logic or their intelligence or their personality and stuff. They just focus on the discussion of the work. And after this, they can still go for tea, for coffee, for lunch. They still chit-chat, they laugh, they joke. But the conflict, the disagreement is about the work. What should be done, how it should be carried out, all those kind of things. Okay? Now, the danger of this is to try and manage that task conflict so that it doesn't shift over to the relationship conflict, right? And that relationship conflict is something more negative, because this is when people may start to attack, critique the other person, right? They might say something like, you don't want to agree with me because you're stubborn, right? So that becomes an attack. Right? Or it says, you just want it your way because you are too proud and arrogant. Okay, so that becomes an attack. And that could lead to more negative outcome. Okay, this is what we call relationship conflict, right? Obviously, it reduces trust, right? It emphasizes that there's a difference between people, right? By saying, look, I am the boss, you are the staff, okay? I am going to make this decision and you better listen to me about it, right? So that creates obviously a friction, right? A friction, right? And then it causes a problem, yeah? So it causes a situation where people are not going to be demotivated, right? They don't want to work. They don't want to communicate with each other. They don't want to share information or even be supportive or help each other out, right? So task conflict may be good, but you have to make sure it does not escalate and shift over into relationship conflict, which is bad. Yeah. So how might we minimize relationship conflict is to keep focused on the goal, on the target, on the objective. Right? So, if somebody starts to feel a bit more frustrated, try to start to calm them down, using emotional intelligence, which we discussed last week, right? Trying to manage people's emotion and keep them focused, bring them back to the discussion on the task. Or say, hey, everybody, right? Come on, let's look at this. Okay, what should be the timeline? What should the facilities be? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions about this matter? Okay, so you're bringing people's attention back to the work itself. If you have good team development as well, you are highly cohesive, you understand each other, you've worked well in the past, okay? And you create a sense of friendship, of community, of support between all the members. That can make people be motivated to maintain the harmony, right? To avoid any kind of relationship conflict, not to attack each other, right? And try to make sure everything is focused still on the work. At the same time, create an environment where people feel safe to disagree, right? People feel safe to voice out their opinion, their opinion that is different. Okay? So if somebody brings or mentions something that is different from others, right, don't the team members should not ridicule them, right? Should not get angry or get defensive. They should actually encourage it, right? They'll say, "Oh, that's a good point, right? What are your thoughts on that? Can you explain a little bit further?" Because maybe they have considered something that you have not thought of. Maybe they see the situation from a different perspective that the other team members have not considered. Right? So you want to try and create a safe environment, a conducive environment for people to be able to voice out their disagreements safely without being worried of being ostracized or attacked by their own team members. So this is what we call psychological safety team norms, right? Psychological safety. They feel safe, right? To be able to voice out their disagreements, but in a polite way, right? So if they are shown interest, if they're shown support from others by saying that, "Oh, that's a good point, well, that's a good idea," or, "Oh, yeah, I never thought of that," right? And then you actually discuss it. That creates an open communication, an open relationship between your members to be more supportive, right? And that can minimize relationship conflict and still keep the discussion focused on the task conflict. Yeah? Now, if we look at this conflict process, okay, in an organization, there are many sources of conflict, which we'll look at in a short while, inshallah, right? And all of this will lead to whether or not somebody perceives that there is conflict and the emotions that they feel, right? The thing about conflict is that it is very subjective. There could be difficult situations, there could be challenges in the workplace, but all the team members or all the people involved do not feel that there is any conflict. Right? They feel that they are unified, they are willing to work together. So in that case, there is no conflict. Okay? Because when you talk about perception, right, it is very subjective. Okay, very subjective. Because it depends on the perception or whether or not somebody thinks or feels that another party is taking advantage of them, or there is a difference in opinion in what people are saying. Okay? So if somebody, even if the situation is considered calm and fine by everybody else, but if one person feels or believes that there is a conflict in the situation, then there will be conflict. Okay? So conflict may manifest or appear, and for that, you have to manage it. Okay, what kind of conflict handling style are you going to apply? Again, inshallah, we're going to look at it a little bit later in this session. What decision you make and what kind of open behaviors are portrayed. Okay, depending on how those conflicts are being handled, what decisions are made, or what behaviors are shown, that can negatively affect that conflict perception, and it can actually escalate or increase the conflict. Because if, let's say, for example, people don't handle the conflict properly, right? They brush off people's, disagreements by saying, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's okay. Just keep quiet. Let the adults speak. Like being very condescending, right? Being very rude and dismissive. Okay." Those kind of behaviors can obviously escalate that conflict. But if the people take it seriously, right, they realize, they acknowledge that conflict is brewing, right, that potentially could occur, and they actually make an effort to try and resolve it, right, in a genuine way, then that could hopefully lead to more positive outcomes, okay, where people feel safe, people feel appreciated, people feel that, okay, this is something that we're working towards the community, right? And the benefit of the company or the team. Obviously, you may have negative outcomes if the conflict is not being managed properly. All right? So we'll look at the sources of conflict now. Okay, so these are the structural sources of conflict that you may find. People not having shared goals. There are differences in values and beliefs, right? Especially if you're working in team projects, right? There's a lot of interdependence. People are relying on each other, and somebody is late, somebody's delayed, somebody's not communicating. Okay, there is also scarce resources. That means there's a lack of resources, so people are competing for it. The rules and regulations are not clearly defined, right? So obviously people may bend the rules, they may manipulate it, right? There's organizational politics. Okay, so that can frustrate and annoy somebody, that can lead to conflict. Communication problems, like I said, okay, making ourselves not very clear. Okay, sometimes we use language terminologies or our phrasing, or even cultural language or cultural expectations can lead to these communication problems. Okay. So how we can manage this is we can emphasize superordinate goals. Now, superordinate goals are basically common goals, right? Making people focused and pay attention to what is the overall objective. Bring people back into the end goal of that project. Okay, saying people, remember, we are supposed to do this. Now, how are we going to work through this? How are we going to get together so that we can achieve this project, right? So get people focused on these common goals and remind them, right? Remind them of their, basically their, what they are competing for, okay? At the same time, reduce differentiation. Okay, so that's why sometimes informal gatherings, right, chit chats, hanging out, even going out for tea, coffee, or a meal. Like here in Malaysia, right? Food, is what we call. Food is our love language. When our social activities revolve around food a lot. Maybe because it's really hot outside, right? So going out for outdoor activities is just really not that suitable, right? So we meet up for coffee, we meet up for meals, and if staff can meet in an informal way and get to know each other, talk to each other, learn about each other, then maybe we might find certain common experiences. It doesn't matter what race or religion you are. You find out that both of you are from engineering, let's say. Okay, you find out that both of you enjoy traveling. You find out that both of you are married with kids, right? So there are so many commonalities, and you want people to build on that commonalities. So improve communication understanding, right? Give feedback, right? Give feedback on the communication. Okay, so when somebody sends me a message, right, what I would do is, hopefully, right, inshallah, I should do, is reply back in something like, so based on the communication, this is what I'm supposed to do. Okay, and then from this is what I understand that I'm supposed to do, and then you list out what it is that you want, what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, so this way you clarify back to make sure you understood properly. Okay, what we are supposed to do, even if we're talking among siblings, right? So with my sister, okay, sometimes she asks me to do something and maybe I'm not paying attention, so she says, hey, I'm talking to you, tell me back, what did I say, right? So I'm like, okay, and then she gets angry because I wasn't listening, right? So that's my problem. Okay, so when my sister talks, I should listen, right? Listen, I'd say, okay, right? So you want me to do this? You want me to do this? Okay, got it. I understand. Okay, so that kind of feedback is very important. Yeah. Also, try to reduce interdependence. Okay, create buffers, create like relaxed time, or create extra resources, okay, like in terms of Slack resources, use integrators. Now, integrators are people that kind of like play kind of like a middle person that can help get you the networking or get you connected together, right? Or even combine jobs, right, into one and get people to do the whole thing from beginning to end so that you can reduce the interdependence, right? Increase the resources. Right? So consider, would it be cheaper just to get more supplies or more resources compared to facing all this negative conflict in the workplace where people are competing constantly, right, for those resources? And that could harm the company in terms of performance, low morale, less communication, less sharing of information, less integration, and all these kind of things, right? So maybe it's just better off for us to buy, right, more, or buy more supplies or more resources. Okay? And make sure that all the rules and regulations are clearly established, clearly defined, clearly shared, reminded, right, constantly, so that, and also implemented. Okay, having rules and regulations but not implementing it can also lead to problems. Okay, so make sure people understand what is expected of them, right? What they should do, what they can't do, right? All of these things, so that people can work within those rules and regulations. Now, in terms of interpersonal conflict handling styles, right, there are 5 basically ways in which we can manage conflict, right? This is the conventional view. Inshallah, we'll look at the Islamic perspective on this. Now, this is the level of assertiveness, right? Low to high, basically meaning how strongly are you going to stand for what it is that you want, right? That you are going to compete for what you want. Compared to level of cooperativeness, low or high, how strongly or how much are you willing to give to the other person, okay? Now, in the case of avoiding, right, where there is low levels of assertiveness and low levels of cooperativeness, right, this is where you are not going to basically demand what you want. At the same time, you're not willing to give in to the other party either. Right? That's why they call it, you're basically avoiding the issue. And it is a lose-lose situation, right? People, you don't get what you want, the other party also doesn't get what they want, okay? With yielding, where there's a high level of cooperativeness but low level of assertiveness, you yield, you give in to the other person, right? So you are satisfying what the other party wants. Okay, so this is a win-lose situation. The other party wins, you lose. And normally this is more suitable if what the other party wants is not really that important to you. Okay? Now, the other one is forcing. Okay, forcing, right, where there's a high degree of assertiveness and low degree of cooperativeness. Now, this is, again, win-lose situation. You may win, the other party may lose, right? And this situation is more suitable if you know you are right, right? And you know that giving in to the other party will lead to future expectations, right? That the other party will still expect you to give in all the time. It's a problem with yielding, actually. If you keep yielding all the time, the other party will keep expecting you to yield all the time, right? And they'll be very surprised when one time you don't yield, and then they'll get very upset with you, right? So forcing, right, when time is short, you need to make a firm decision, so you force the issue. Of course, the negative thing about that is it may disrupt or lessen trust between the members if you force the issue on this. Now, compromise, right? Some degree of assertiveness, some degree of cooperativeness, right? Now, this is still a win-lose situation, right? Because when you compromise, right, you are not getting fully exactly what you want, and at the same time, you are not totally giving in to the other person what they want. So you win some, you lose some. Okay, so compromising, okay, basically you are reaching an agreement where both parties are willing to accept They might not be fully happy with the situation, but they may be willing to accept. Right? Now, the example I use in my class is that a group of friends want to go out to eat. Okay. Now, one person wants to have, let's say, Western cuisine. Another, they know a restaurant that serves really good Western cuisine, and another person wants to eat Asian cuisine, right? And they know a restaurant that serves really good Asian cuisine. Okay. Now they can't come to an agreement, so they compromise and go to a food court. Right now in Malaysia, and I believe in many countries as well, in a shopping mall, there is a food court, right, or a food center where there are many stalls and an open area. So you buy whatever food you want, and then you sit together and you can eat. So the person that wants the Western food can go to the Western stall. The person that wants Asian food can go to the Asian stall. You get to eat the cuisine you want, but it may not be from the restaurant that you want, right? So this compromising, right, that you win some, you lose some. Okay. Now, with problem solving, there's a high degree of assertiveness and a high degree of cooperativeness. And in this case, what happens is, how do we solve this problem together? Okay? How can we get together and come up with a solution where you get what you want and I get what I want? And this is a win-win situation. Okay? It may take time, right? And then this normally happens when both parties are quite friendly, right? They're willing to work together. They're quite open about what it is that they want, right? So this can lead to problem solving. All right. So in the case of the friends, right? They, one party wants a Western cuisine, another party wants, let's say, a Malaysian village type food, right? Cuisine or noodles or something like that. And then somebody says, well, there is a new steamboat barbecue restaurant that's open, right? And then both party was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always wanted to try that restaurant, right? Oh, what if we all go? Right? So you find a solution that everybody is willing to accept, right? Which may not be exactly what the first party wants or the second party wants, but a third option even that both party wants. Okay? So this could be a potential problem-solving technique. Right? So here you can see, right, forcing is a win-lose, yielding is a lose-win, and then best when best to use these kind of approaches, but there are problems with the situation, right? Similarly, if you avoid the situation or compromise on the situation, like I said, compromising is still win-lose because it's suboptimal. It is not the best option. Yeah, and problem solving tends to be the best, which is a win-win situation. Okay, and this is reminded in, of course, again, Surah Al-Hujurat in verse 10. Right, you must remember, right, that believers are but a single brotherhood. So try and make peace and reconciliation between your two contending parties, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that ye may receive mercy. Okay, so this surah surah reminds us to try to use the problem solving approach as much as possible. Okay, so even from the examples of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, he was a conflict manager as well. Okay, because even before his prophethood, he resolved tribal disputes, and obviously during his prophethood, right, there were many disputes that he resolved. Right, he also negotiated peace treaties, for example, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Okay, and also encouraged Muslims to reconcile after any kind of disagreements. Okay, for example, the conflict between the Aus and the Khazraj tribes. Okay, so we will look now on the issue of conflict management. Okay, we looked at conflict resolution, right, seeing how we might be able to resolve it. But Islam reminds us, go for preventive measures. Okay, try to prevent conflict in the first place, right? If you've heard Dr. Ridwan's session earlier this morning, he talked about keeping promises. Keeping promises, which is very, very important. So being honest in our dealings, transparency in our contracts and agreements, right? So that, there is no hidden agendas. Right? Try to be kind and respectful. Okay, treat other people the way we would like to be treated. Basically, that is a reminder of pretty much all the major religions, right? And obviously, Islam also reminds us of that. And try to avoid any kind of suspicion or spying. Okay, as mentioned in Surah Al-Hujurat as well, verse 12. Right? So all these kind of behaviors, right? We talk about human behaviors, try to reduce the likelihood of conflict happening in the first place. Yeah. So conflict management in Islam, make sure that is justice, right? Adil, right? As mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 8. Try to reconcile as well, reconciliation, right? In a hadith, okay, that the fact that putting things right between people is more excellent in degree compared to fasting, prayer, and charity, right? Trying to maintain ukhuwah, right? Trying to resolve and reconcile is actually more important. Not say more important. It is the importance of it, right? The importance of it. It's when we talk about fasting and prayer and doing charity, right? That intensity, of trying to reconcile any kind of dispute is equally important. Yeah. Forgiveness and patience, right? It may not be very easy to forgive, but maybe we can be patient, right? Maybe we can be understanding, going to the emotional intelligence. Okay, so if we try to pardon and overlook and forgive, then inshallah, we pray that Allah will be forgiving and merciful towards us as well, right? For any kind of misgivings or misdeeds that we've done towards other people, right? So inshallah, Allah will be forgiving and merciful, as mentioned in Surah At-Takabun, verse 14. At the same time, have an open dialogue, consultation, shura method. Okay, consult them. Yeah, Surah Al-Imran, again, to make sure that we understand each other and avoid any kind of backbiting and slander, as we mentioned before, right, on Surah Al-Hujurat. Yeah. Now, there are third-party intervention, mediation, inquisition, and arbitration. This depends on how much level of control you have and level of decision. In mediation, there's a high level of control but low level of decision making. Mediations are like middle people. They mediate between the two parties. They will go to one party and say, person A, really didn't mean it that way. Maybe you would like to talk to them, right? And then go to party A and person B, and say that, party B, the person B, is, was affected, was hurt by this, and the mediation, right? They will try to bring both parties together to discuss, but they don't control the final decision. Okay, this is different from inquisition. Inquisition has a high degree of personal control and high degree of decision control. They force, they ask, right? They emphasize, what is it that you said? What did you do? Right? And then they make a final decision. Now, managers seem to like the inquisition approach, but it doesn't really work very well. General people don't seem to like it because it's very forceful. Right? It doesn't build a level of trust between the parties. But this is different from arbitration, okay, where there is low level of process control but high degree of decision control. And normally arbitrators, the people who handle the arbitration, are retired judges and stuff, right? So both parties will talk to the person will ask some questions, right? But what the people choose to explain or to choose to share to the arbitrator do not have much control, but they do decide. At the end of the day, when mediation doesn't work, arbitration comes in, right? And then the arbitrator will say, look, this is the final decision, and both parties must accept. Right? So normally both parties, they will sign a contract before the arbitration process that they will agree to the final decision of the arbitrator. Right? So like I said before, managers prefer an inquisitive strategy, but it doesn't work very well. The mediation, right, it has the highest potential satisfaction, right? And in Islam, it's called wasata or wasakta. right? Wasata. Okay, where there is trying to moderate between the two parties. And there's also arbitration, where it is a resolution through appointed judges or arbitrators, normally used when mediation fails, and this is known as tahkim, right, in Islam. So finally, this is a reminder that if you are ever asked to be the mediator or arbitrator, please do it with justice. Okay, please ensure that you do it in a truthful manner, in a trusting manner, right? Mentioned in Surah An-Nisa and also Surah Al-Ma'idah, right? Because we're doing this for the sake of Allah as well, right? Well, that's all. Thank you very much. If there are any questions.